They called his $550,000 collector's motorcycle an eyesore and had it illegally towed. But what the HOA didn't know was that they had just declared war on a billion-dollar corporate executive, and the price of their arrogance would be paid with the one thing they cherished most, their president's own house. The neighborhood of Serpent's Gate was a study in controlled perfection. Every shrub was manicured, every street lamp an antique replica, and every homeowner lived under the silent, rigid dictatorship of the Pinnacle Ridge Homeowners Association. Here, peace was a mandate, and conformity the law. This oppressive order was the last thing on the mind of Elias Thorne. Elias was a man who had built his own empire on intelligence, tenacity, and a profound disinterest in suburban gossip. As a top executive for Motori Italia, he was accustomed to high stakes and high pressure. His home in Serpent's Gate was his fortress, a place where he expected to simply be left alone. He paid his astronomical dues, he kept his property immaculate, and his only demand was privacy. That expectation died one crisp autumn morning when Elias opened his mailbox. Inside, tucked beneath a stack of junk mail, was a stark white envelope bearing the Pinnacle Ridge HOA letterhead, a script so fancy it practically reeked of condescension. The letter, addressed with cold formality, informed him, "Mr. Thorne, it has come to the board's attention that your Motori Italia 1969 Golden Tank Scrambler, currently visible in your driveway, does not meet our community's aesthetic standards. Please remove this unsightly vehicle from public view within 72 hours, or further action will be taken." Elias read the words "unsightly vehicle" 3 times. A slow burn of disbelief ignited a quiet, dangerous fury in his chest. The Scrambler wasn't just a motorcycle, it was a museum-quality masterpiece. A limited edition, vintage icon, polished to such a high sheen that the golden tank looked like solidified sunlight. It was worth a conservative $550,000, and the self-appointed rulers of this bland cul-de-sac had labeled it an eyesore? For a moment, Elias genuinely laughed. "It has to be a mistake," he muttered to himself. But the more he considered the source, the more the truth crystallized. This wasn't about aesthetics or property values. This was about control. It was a small act of perceived power, a test to see if he would bow to their insignificant authority. And Elias Thorne, a man who had stared down corporate sharks and never flinched, wasn't about to be intimidated by a group of petty, rule-clutching neighbors. The monthly HOA meeting was held in the drafty community center, a room smelling faintly of stale coffee and unearned self-importance. Elias walked in with the letter folded neatly in his hand, his demeanor cool, his eyes steady. The board sat like a minor royal court. 5 middle-aged citizens who confused managing lawn height with wielding genuine power. At the head of the table sat Prudence Albright, the HOA president. Prudence was the embodiment of Serpent's Gate's suffocating elegance. Impeccably tailored, her silver hair perfectly sculpted, her pearl necklace gleaming under the harsh fluorescent light. She didn't acknowledge Elias's entrance, a small, calculated snub that told him everything. Elias walked directly to the front and dropped the letter onto the table, the sharp thud echoing in the silence. "Let's discuss this," he said, his voice a low, commanding baritone. "My Scrambler. What is the further action you intend to take regarding my personal property?" Prudence finally raised her eyes, her expression a practiced mask of weary patience and superiority. "Mr. Thorne, we were in the middle of my Scrambler," Elias interrupted, leaning slightly on the table. "Tell me the subsection of the bylaws that mandates the removal of a legally registered, non-commercial, privately owned vehicle from my own driveway." Prudence's thin smile tightened. "This is a violation of community aesthetic standards, Mr. Thorne. We have an image to maintain. We are protecting the integrity and, of course, property values of Serpent's Gate." Elias almost chuckled. He'd sat in multi-million-dollar negotiations. He recognized a flimsy excuse when he heard one. This wasn't about money. It was about Prudence's need for dominion, her desire to remind everyone who held the leash. He could have capitulated. He could have rolled the bike into his 3-car garage and avoided the conflict. Most people would have, but Elias wasn't most people. He'd earned his position, his wealth and his dignity through hard work, and he would not let a neighborhood tyrant dictate where he parked his property. He met her gaze, his dark eyes unwavering. "No," he said, the single syllable ringing with quiet finality. The word hit the room like a gunshot. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. Prudence's composure fractured for a split second, a micro-expression of outrage replacing her smug patience. "You refuse to comply, Mr. Thorne?" she asked, her voice dropping. "That is precisely what I am saying," he confirmed. "Then further action will be taken," she warned, her eyes blazing with affronted authority. Elias straightened up, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. "Try it," he challenged. "What would you do if a neighborhood committee tried to intimidate you into hiding your own property just to feed their sense of control? Drop it in the comments below. We love seeing where our viewers are tuning in from. And if you believe that standing your ground isn't defiance, it's dignity, then smash that like button and subscribe to Story Arc, because this story right here shows exactly what happens when arrogance pushes the wrong man too far. Elias went to bed that night with a knot of unease in his gut. He knew Prudence's type, people who mistook malice for management. Just after 3 a.m., the sound came, a low metallic shriek, heavy chains scraping against the asphalt. It was a deliberate, industrial noise that didn't belong in the faux tranquility of Serpent's Gate. Elias threw off the covers and strode to the window. His heart plummeted. The driveway was empty. The scrambler was gone. For a moment, his mind blanked, followed by a rush of ice-cold panic and white-hot rage. Theft was the first frantic thought, but there were no tire marks, no broken glass, no tripped alarm. That meant only one thing: towed by the only people arrogant enough to believe they could commit grand theft for a parking infraction, the Pinnacle Ridge HOA. His jaw locked. Elias, barefoot and in a t-shirt, was out the door and in his truck seconds later. He needed proof before he confronted the Serpent Queen. He called the number for Atlas Recovery, the only impound lot the HOA used. The dispatcher, a tired-sounding man, confirmed it. "Yeah, a gold-tanked motorcycle came in about 2 hours ago." "Is it secured? Is it in one piece?" Elias demanded. There was a heavy pause on the line. Then the man hesitated. Depends on what you mean by one piece, sir. It was handled roughly." That hesitation was all the confirmation Elias needed. 15 minutes later, his truck skidded to a stop outside the chain-link fence of Atlas Recovery. What he saw through the floodlights made his blood run cold. There was his bike, the golden tank scrambler, or what was left of it. It lay on its side, twisted and broken. The golden fuel tank was crushed inward, a sign of deliberate malice. The pristine chrome was scored with deep, vicious scratches. The front wheel was bent at an impossible, agonizing angle. A short, disgruntled employee ambled up. "Yeah, that's how she came in," he muttered, leaning against the fence. "You let them tow a $500,000 collector's piece like this?" Elias's voice was dangerously low. The man shrugged. "Wasn't my call. HOA called us, said it was abandoned property. We just picked it up." Abandoned. The word cut deeper than the sight of the damage. They had called his pride and joy, a piece of industrial art sitting in his own driveway, abandoned? Something inside Elias Thorne snapped. He had always been a man who walked away, who let petty slights slide. But this wasn't a slight. This was vandalism, illegal seizure, and profound disrespect, all cloaked in the false authority of a suburban committee. Elias stared at the wreckage. He could already picture Prudence Albright's smug porcelain face, her fake smile, her syrupy voice in his head. "Mr. Thorne, I suggest you calm down." He was calm, deadly calm, because Prudence Albright had just made a catastrophic error. She didn't just target a homeowner. She targeted the chief operations strategist for Motore Italian North America, a man who knew the bike's true value, the legal landscape, and, most importantly, the precise application of overwhelming corporate power. The HOA hadn't just towed a motorcycle. They had declared war on a billion-dollar company's legacy asset.
Elias didn't waste time with confrontation. He didn't call the police. He didn't even attend the next HOA meeting. He drove straight to his corporate office. The first call he made was to Motore Italia's global legal division. When a company worth billions gets wind that a minor organization has illegally seized and willfully destroyed one of their most valuable and historic collector's pieces, things move with terrifying speed. Within 48 hours, the paperwork was drafted. By the end of the week, the Pinnacle Ridge HOA received a certified letter that shut down their entire operation. It was a $1.5 million lawsuit for theft, criminal property damage, and unlawful seizure, all printed on legal letterhead so thick it practically smelled of authority. The documents landed on Prudence Albright's pristine marble entryway, and the panic began. The board instantly collapsed. Resignations flew in, desperate attempts to shift blame, but the legal hammer had fallen. Prudence had crossed the wrong man, and the consequences were immediate and non-negotiable. At the emergency HOA meeting, attended only by Prudence and a single terrified board member, Prudence's voice cracked with manic hysteria. "This is insane! It's a motorcycle! We'll just replace it!" she shrieked, waving the lawsuit papers like a surrender flag. Elias sat across the table, calm and immaculate, his arms folded. "I don't know, Prudence. Seems fair to me. My so-called unsightly vehicle was worth more than your entire house." The truth landed on her like a physical blow. Her house, the symbol of her manufactured superiority, was valued at $950,000. The damages, penalties, and Motore Italia's legal fees totaled $1.5 million. It was a financial death sentence for the HOA, a debt they could only pay by liquidating their assets. The judge, a no-nonsense man, took one look at the bike's appraisal and the documented timeline of Prudence's smug emails and illegal towing order. The ruling was swift and absolute. The HOA was fully liable. The only asset large enough to cover the judgment, Prudence Albright's home. When the movers came, the entire neighborhood of Serpent's Gate gathered, not in solidarity with the deposed queen, but in celebration. Whispers of relief and hushed congratulations echoed through the cul-de-sac as her designer furniture was loaded onto the truck. The reign of terror was over. Elias, however, wasn't quite done. He bought the foreclosed house at auction. He didn't need it, but he had a vision. He had the scrambler meticulously restored, rebuilt from the ground up, the golden tank shining brighter than ever. He then turned Prudence Albright's former residence into a private monument, the Motore Italia Heritage Gallery. Behind a sheet of impact-resistant glass, in what used to be Prudence's pretentious living room, stood the restored 1969 golden tank scrambler. It was a constant, glorious monument to the fact that sometimes the true victory isn't winning the argument, but making sure your opponent pays a price that teaches them the irreversible cost of arrogance. If you believe that what happened here wasn't just justice, it was payback with purpose, then smash that like button and subscribe to Story Arc. Because sometimes the real victory isn't winning the fight, it's owning the battle.